The woman appeared beside my booth without warning. One moment the space was empty, the next she was standing there, close enough that I could smell rain on her jacket even though the sky outside had been clear all morning. I was having lunch at Romano's, a family restaurant tucked into a strip mall on the south side of Denver, where the mountains blur into smog and the traffic never really stops. I'd been meeting my daughter Sophia there every other Tuesday since James died, partly because the marinara reminded me of his mother's recipe, partly because the owner never mentioned the empty chair where my husband used to sit. Sophia was in the restroom when the woman approached. She couldn't have been more than 40, with dark hair cut short and precise, wearing a charcoal blazer that looked expensive but worn. Her eyes moved across my face like she was confirming something she'd memorized. "Catherine Brenner," she said. Not a question, a statement. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. "Do I know you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she placed a small padded envelope on the table between my plate and the breadbasket, her fingers trembling just slightly as she released it. "Open this when you're alone tonight," she whispered, "not before. And whatever you do, don't let them see it." "Them?" I managed, but she was already turning away. "Wait," I called after her, but she moved quickly through the restaurant, weaving between tables, pushing through the glass door into the parking lot. By the time I stood up, she'd vanished into the midday traffic on Colfax Avenue. I sat back down slowly, staring at the envelope. It was pale blue, padded, sealed with clear tape. No writing on the outside, no return address, nothing to indicate where it came from or why this stranger knew my name. Sophia returned moments later, sliding into the booth with her phone in one hand. "Sorry," Daniel texted about the inspection. She glanced at me. "You okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," I said too quickly, tucking the envelope into my purse before she could ask about it. "Just tired." She studied me with that particular expression she'd developed over the past year. The one that said she was cataloging my weaknesses, measuring my decline. "You're not sleeping again." "Some nights are harder than others." "Mom." She reached across the table, covering my hand with hers. The gesture would have felt comforting 6 months ago. Now it felt like assessment. "Daniel and I have been talking. We think it's time to seriously consider the condo development." There it was, the conversation we'd been circling for weeks. "The property's too much for you now," she continued, her voice soft but rehearsed. "All that land, the maintenance, being so isolated, and the property taxes keep climbing. It's not sustainable." I pulled my hand back gently. "I've managed that property for 32 years, Sophia. I think I can handle it a while longer." "But why should you have to?" Her husband Daniel appeared then, returning from the parking lot where he'd been taking a work call. He slid in beside Sophia with the easy confidence of someone who'd already decided how this conversation would end. "Catherine, we're not trying to push you out. We're trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" "From being alone out there," Sophia said. "From struggling with something that's become a burden. Dad would want you to be practical." The mention of James made my throat tight. Daniel leaned forward, elbows on the table. "We've already had preliminary conversations with developers. The offers are generous. More than generous. You could move closer to us, somewhere safer, somewhere you wouldn't have to worry about every repair and every bill." I looked between them. My daughter, who had my husband's dark eyes but none of his patience, and her husband, who spoke about my life like it was a business transaction that needed closing. "I'm not selling," I said quietly. Sophia's expression hardened just slightly. "Mom, please don't be stubborn about this. We're trying to help." "I didn't ask for help." The tension hung there for a moment before Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at it, muttered an apology, and stepped outside. Sophia watched him go, then turned back to me with a sigh. "Just think about it," she said. "That's all we're asking." But I could see in her eyes it wasn't a request. It was the beginning of something that wouldn't end with my agreement. It would end with their persistence. They paid the check together, whispering near the register, the way they'd been doing more often lately, those low, urgent conversations that stopped when I came near. I gathered my things slowly, feeling the weight of the envelope in my purse like it carried something heavier than paper. When we stepped outside, the Colorado sun was bright and indifferent. Sophia hugged me briefly. "I'll call you Thursday," she said, but it sounded more like a warning than a promise. I drove home alone, taking the long route through the foothills, past subdivisions that hadn't existed when James and I first bought the land. Our property sat at the end of a dirt road that turned to mud every spring, surrounded by scrub oak and ponderosa pine, with the mountains rising behind it like a wall between past and present. The house came into view as I rounded the last curve. A rambling ranch-style structure with cedar siding that James had stained himself, a wraparound porch he'd built the summer Sophia turned 12, and 40 acres of land that stretched back into national forest. I parked in the gravel turnaround and sat there for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, staring at the place I'd called home for more than 3 decades. For the first time since James died, it didn't feel like safety. It felt like something people were circling, waiting for me to weaken. Inside, I locked the door. Something I'd started doing only recently, though I couldn't have said why. The house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs. I set my purse on the kitchen counter and stared at it for a long time before finally pulling out the envelope. The blue padding felt cheap under my fingers. I turned it over, looking for any clue about its origin, but there was nothing, just the sealed flap and whatever lay inside. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I made tea I didn't drink and sat at the kitchen table, watching the light change through the windows as afternoon slid toward evening. The mountains turned purple, then black. Stars appeared one by one. At exactly 9:17, according to the clock on the microwave, I finally tore open the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of printer paper and a small object wrapped in tissue. I unwrapped the object first, a USB drive, black and ordinary, the kind you could buy at any office supply store. The paper had 3 lines, printed in plain Arial font, 11:45 p.m. tonight. Answer when it rings. Tell no one. My hands went cold. I checked the envelope again, shook it, searched for anything else. Nothing. No signature, no explanation. I looked at the clock. 9:20. 2.5 hours to wait. I spent that time doing things that didn't need doing, wiping down counters, reorganizing the pantry, folding laundry that had been clean for days. Anything to keep my hands busy and my mind from spinning through possibilities I didn't want to consider. At 10:30, I turned off all the lights except the one over the stove. The house felt too large suddenly, too full of shadows and corners where anything could hide. At 11, I checked my phone, fully charged. No missed calls, no messages, just the home screen with a photo of James and me at Sophia's wedding, both of us squinting into the sun, his arm around my waist. At 11:40, I sat down at the kitchen table and placed the phone in front of me. Screen up. At 11:44, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. At 11:45 exactly, the phone rang. The screen showed no number, no name, just the word unknown glowing in the dark kitchen. I answered on the second ring, my hand shaking so badly the phone nearly slipped. Hello? My voice came out thin and uncertain. Silence at first. Just the faint hiss of an open line, the sense of someone listening on the other end. Then a voice spoke, and the floor seemed to drop away beneath me. Catherine. It was James. Not someone who sounded like James. Not a recording I'd forgotten about. It was his voice. The exact cadence, the slight roughness from years of smoking he'd quit before we married, the way he said my name like it had 3 syllables instead of 2. No, I whispered. This isn't possible. I know how this sounds, the voice continued, and I could hear something beneath it now. A distortion, like he was speaking through some kind of filter. I know what you're thinking, but I need you to listen carefully because I don't have much time. Tears spilled down my face before I could stop them. You're dead. I buried you. I stood at your grave and they lied to you, Catherine, about how it happened, about why. My breath caught in my chest. Who lied? Sophia, Daniel, the sheriff's department. Everyone involved. The kitchen spun slightly. I gripped the edge of the table. You're not making sense. My death wasn't an accident, he said, and his voice cracked just slightly. It was made to look like one. And if you don't act quickly, they're going to do the same thing to you? Who? I demanded. Who would? Our daughter, the words landed like a physical blow, and her husband. They've been planning this for over a year. I shook my head violently, even though he couldn't see me. No, Sophia would never. The property, Catherine. It's not about you. It's about what's underneath it. Static crackled through the line. The voice fought through it. There's a system of old mine shafts under the western section of our land. They connect to caves that run for miles. Sophia and Daniel found them 3 years ago. They've been using them. Using them for what? Smuggling, storage, trafficking? I don't know all of it. I couldn't get deep enough before they realized I knew. My mind raced back through the last year of James's life. The nights he came home late, the dirt under his fingernails he claimed was from fixing irrigation, the way he'd started locking his office when he never had before. I confronted Sophia, the voice continued. I told her I'd go to the authorities if she didn't shut it down. She promised she would. I believed her. A long pause. That was my mistake. Why didn't you tell me? I choked out. To protect you. If you didn't know anything, you weren't a threat. But now they need the land sold. They need it transferred, developed, buried under concrete and permits, so no one can trace what happened there. And you're in the way. The line hissed violently. Background noise surged. Voices, movement, something metallic and sharp. I have to go, he said urgently. The USB drive has everything I managed to save. Documents, recordings, proof. Hide it somewhere they won't think to look. Don't trust the local police. Half of them are on Daniel's payroll. Wait, I said desperately. Please. How are you alive? Where are you? I'm not, he said quietly. Not in any way that matters. But I loved you enough to leave you this much. Don't let them win, Catherine. Don't let them bury the truth with me. The call ended. I sat there with the phone pressed to my ear long after the line went dead, listening to nothing, my whole body shaking. When I finally lowered the phone, I checked the call log. No record, no number, no duration, as if the call had never happened. But my face was wet with tears, and the USB drive sat on the table in front of me like a landmine waiting to explode. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark kitchen until the sun came up, turning the drive over and over in my hands, trying to decide if I'd lost my mind or if the man I'd loved for 32 years had just reached out from the grave to warn me that our daughter wanted me dead. By the time morning light filled the kitchen, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I had to see what was on that drive, and once I did, nothing would ever be the same. Sophia arrived unannounced just after 8 in the morning. I watched her SUV pull up the drive through the kitchen window, Daniel in the passenger seat, both of them wearing expressions that looked practiced in the rearview mirror. I'd hidden the USB drive inside an old coffee tin in the back of the pantry, behind bags of flour I hadn't opened in months. Not sophisticated, but I needed it somewhere quickly, somewhere that didn't look like hiding. When I opened the door, Sophia was already halfway up the porch steps, carrying a bakery bag and 2 cups of coffee. "Surprise," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Thought we'd have breakfast together. You should have called first." "I did. 3 times. You didn't answer." She walked past me into the house without waiting for an invitation, Daniel following close behind. He nodded at me briefly, already scanning the living room like he was taking inventory. I'd turned off my phone at some point during the night. I couldn't remember when. I was sleeping, I lied. Until 8 a.m.? Sophia set the coffee and pastries on the kitchen table, then turned to study me. "You look terrible, Mom. When's the last time you actually slept through the night?" "I'm fine. You're clearly not." She pulled out a chair, gesturing for me to sit like this was her house and I was the guest. "That's actually why we're here. We need to talk about some things." Daniel remained standing near the doorway to James's old office, hands in his pockets, trying to look casual and failing. I sat down slowly, wrapping my hands around the coffee cup Sophia pushed toward me. "We've been doing some research," Sophia began, her voice taking on that careful, reasonable tone people use when they're about to say something you won't like. "About your financial situation." My stomach dropped. "My finances are none of your business. They are when you're our only family." She pulled out her phone, scrolling to something she'd prepared. "The property taxes have increased 40% in the last 5 years. Insurance went up again last month. You're pulling from savings at a rate that's concerning. I'm managing." "Are you?" Daniel spoke for the first time, his voice mild but pointed. "Because from where we're standing, it looks like you're barely holding on." I looked at my daughter, searching for some trace of the girl who used to braid wildflowers into crowns, who cried when we had to put down our old dog, who'd promised at her father's funeral that we'd get through this together. All I saw was a stranger wearing her face. "What do you want, Sophia?" She exchanged a glance with Daniel before answering. "We want to help you. We've been talking to an attorney about setting up a conservatorship, just temporarily, just until you're back on your feet." The word hit me like cold water. A conservatorship. "It's not what you think," she said quickly. "It's just a legal framework to make sure you're protected, to make sure decisions are made in your best interest. You've been through trauma, Mom. Grief does things to people. Makes them confused, makes them forget things, makes them vulnerable." "I'm not confused." "You didn't answer your phone all night," Daniel pointed out. "You look like you haven't slept in days. You're isolated out here with no support system." "I have you," I said quietly. Sophia reached across the table and took my hand, her grip firm. "And we're trying to be here for you. But you have to let us help. The easiest thing would be to sell the property. We've already got developers interested, good offers, enough to set you up comfortably for the rest of your life. You could move into one of those senior communities in town, somewhere with activities and medical staff, and I'm 63, not 90. I pulled my hand back. And I'm not selling. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Daniel straightened slightly, his jaw tightening. Sophia's expression hardened into something I'd never seen before, something calculating and cold. Mom, please don't make this difficult. Difficult for whom? For all of us. She stood up, pacing to the window, arms crossed. You're being stubborn about something that doesn't make sense anymore. This property is a burden. Dad's gone. There's no reason for you to stay out here alone, struggling when there are better options. This is my home. It's land, Daniel said flatly. 4 walls and dirt. It's not worth destroying yourself over. I looked between them and felt something shift inside me. The last thread of denial, snapping clean. The voice on the phone had been right. This wasn't concern. This was a campaign. Get out, I said quietly. Sophia turned sharply. What? I want you to leave. Now, Mom, you're being irrational. I said, get out of my house. I stood up, my voice stronger now. And don't come back until you can treat me like a human being instead of an obstacle. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Daniel's hand went to Sophia's elbow, steering her toward the door. This is grief talking, he said over his shoulder. We'll give you some space. But Catherine, this conversation isn't over. With or without your cooperation, we're going to do what's necessary. The words hung in the air like a threat. Sophia paused in the doorway, looking back at me with something that might have been regret or might have been frustration. I love you, Mom. I hope you remember that when you've had time to think clearly. They left. I watched through the window as their SUV reversed down the drive, gravel crunching under the tires, disappearing around the curve. Only then did I realize I was shaking. I locked every door and window in the house, then went to the pantry and retrieved the USB drive. My laptop was old, a dinosaur by modern standards, but it still worked. I plugged in the drive with trembling hands and waited for it to load. The directory that appeared contained dozens of files, documents, spreadsheets, video files, audio recordings. I started with a folder labeled Evidence, Timeline. The first document was a letter, addressed to me, written in James's careful handwriting that had been scanned into digital form. Catherine, if you're reading this, I've run out of time. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you while I was alive. I thought I could handle it. Thought I could stop it before it got this far. I was wrong. What follows is everything I managed to gather over 18 months of investigation. I need you to understand that I didn't want to believe it either. But the evidence doesn't lie. Our daughter and her husband are not the people we thought they were. And the property you're standing on has become the center of something criminal, something dangerous, something that cost me my life. Stay safe, trust no one, and please, don't let them win. All my love, James. My vision blurred. I wiped my eyes and kept reading. The next files were bank records, Daniel's accounts, showing deposits that made no sense for a commercial real estate agent. 50,000 here, 75,000 there, always in cash, always withdrawn within days and dispersed through shell companies. Then there were photographs, time-stamped images taken at night, showing trucks on our property in places vehicles shouldn't be able to reach, close-ups of tire tracks in mud near the western boundary, a series of shots showing Daniel and 2 men I didn't recognize standing near what looked like a cave entrance I'd never seen before, illuminated by flashlights and headlamps. I opened one of the video files. It was dark, shaky footage from what must have been James's phone, hidden and recording. The audio was rough, but I could hear voices. Told you he's becoming a problem, Daniel's voice, tense and angry. So handle it. A man I didn't recognize. I'm not doing anything that comes back on me. Then you better hope he keeps his mouth shut, because if this operation gets exposed, you're going down with the rest of us. The video cut off. I sat back, my chest tight, feeling like the walls were closing in. There were more recordings, phone calls that James must have captured somehow, conversations between Sophia and Daniel discussing the property problem and timeline for transfer and what to do about him. In one, Sophia's voice was clear and cold. He's not going to stop. You know that. We need to make a decision. I couldn't breathe. I stopped the playback and pushed the laptop away, standing up so fast my chair tipped backward. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't grief playing tricks. This was documentation. Methodical, time-stamped evidence that my husband had been murdered and my daughter had been involved. I walked to the bathroom and threw up, then sat on the tile floor with my back against the wall, shaking. When I could stand again, I splashed cold water on my face and looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked older than 63, hollowed out, haunted, alone, but alive. I went back to the laptop and kept reading, forcing myself through every file, every document, every piece of evidence James had risked everything to collect. By the time I finished, the sun was past noon, and I understood 3 things with terrible clarity. First, there was an extensive network of abandoned mines under the western section of our property that connected to natural caverns running for miles underground. Sophia and Daniel had discovered them during a hiking trip years ago and had kept it secret. Second, they'd been using those caverns for smuggling. I couldn't tell exactly what, but the financial records suggested drugs, possibly weapons, maybe even people. The isolation of our property made it perfect. No neighbors, no surveillance, access to back roads that connected to highways without passing through town. Third, James had figured it out when he noticed unusual vehicle traffic and started investigating. He'd documented everything, built a case, and confronted Sophia. She'd promised to shut it down. Instead, she and Daniel had arranged for his car to go off the road on a rainy night on a curve he'd driven 1,000 times before. The official report said he'd been going too fast, lost control, hydroplaned. The sheriff's department had closed the case within a week. I now knew why. My phone rang, making me jump. I looked at the screen. Sophia calling. I didn't answer. She called again and again. On the 4th call, she left a voicemail. "Mom, please pick up. I know you're upset, but we need to talk about this like adults. Daniel has been in touch with Dr. Morrison about getting you evaluated. Just to make sure you're okay. It's not an attack, it's concern. Please call me back." Dr. Morrison was my physician, a kind man in his 50s who'd treated our family for years. The idea that Daniel was talking to him about me, framing me as unstable, made my blood run cold. I was being set up, isolated, painted as confused and grieving and incapable. When they finally moved against me, whether it was forced conservatorship or something worse, no one would question it. The poor widow who couldn't handle being alone, who'd lost touch with reality, who tragically had an accident on her own property. Just like James. I called the one person whose number was in the most recent file on the USB drive, a name James had noted with 2 stars, and the words trusted, last resort. The phone rang 3 times before a woman answered. "This is Brenner, isn't it?" she said without preamble. "How did you—" "James told me you might call if things went bad. My name is Nicole Reeves. I'm a federal investigator with the Organized Crime Task Force. Your husband came to me 8 months ago with preliminary evidence. We've been building a case ever since." Relief and terror flooded through me in equal measure. "They're going to kill me." "No," she said firmly, "they're not, because you're going to do exactly what I tell you, and we're going to finish what your husband started. Are you somewhere safe right now?" "I'm home. Lock your doors. Don't open them for anyone except me. I'm 40 minutes away. I'll have a team with me. In the meantime, I need you to tell me everything that's happened since James died." So I did. I told her about Sophia and Daniel's pressure to sell, about the conservatorship threat, about the mysterious phone call and the USB drive. I told her about the recordings and the photographs and the sick certainty that my daughter saw me as nothing more than a problem to be solved. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "Catherine," Nicole said finally, "what I'm about to ask you is going to be the hardest thing you've ever done. But it's the only way we catch them all, not just Sophia and Daniel, but everyone involved in the network. Are you willing to wear a wire?" My hands went numb. "You want me to—" "What? We need them on record making threats, admitting involvement, showing their intent. James gave us the foundation, but we need current evidence to make arrests stick. If you agree to help, we'll set up a meeting. You'll tell them you've reconsidered, that you're willing to sell. They'll get confident, they'll talk, and we'll be listening. They'll know something's wrong, not if you sell it right. You're scared, you're tired, you want this to be over. That's what they expect. That's what they've been pushing you toward." She paused. "I won't lie to you, there's risk, but we'll have agents positioned close. You won't be alone." I looked around the kitchen where James and I had shared 30 years of breakfasts and arguments and quiet mornings. I thought about him driving those same roads night after night, gathering evidence, knowing what it might cost him, doing it anyway because it was right. "Okay," I whispered. "Tell me what to do. First, send them a text. Say you've been thinking about what they said. Say you're ready to talk seriously about selling. Keep it brief. Keep it emotional. Can you do that? I pulled up Sophia's number with shaking hands and typed, "You're right. I can't do this anymore. Can we meet tomorrow and discuss options? I'm sorry for how I reacted." I showed the message to Nicole over video call. She nodded. "Perfect. Send it." I hit send and watched the message deliver. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Sophia typing a response. "Of course, Mom. Tomorrow afternoon, we can meet at the house. I love you." I felt sick. "Good," Nicole said. "Now here's what happens next." Nicole arrived 90 minutes later in an unmarked sedan with 2 other agents. A tall man with silver hair who introduced himself as Agent Torres, and a younger woman named Kim who didn't say much but moved through my house with professional efficiency, checking sightlines and exits. They set up in the dining room, spreading equipment across the table James had built from reclaimed barn wood 20 years ago. Laptops, recording devices, something that looked like a small microphone attached to a transmitter no bigger than a book of matches. "This goes inside your shirt," Kim explained, holding up the device. "It's sensitive enough to pick up conversation from across a room, but you'll want to stay relatively close to whoever's talking. We'll be monitoring from a vehicle parked down the road, close enough to reach you in under 2 minutes if anything goes wrong." "Define anything goes wrong," I said, my voice shakier than I wanted. Torres answered, his tone matter of fact. "If they get aggressive, if they try to physically remove you from the property, if weapons get involved, we're not expecting any of that. This is a real estate conversation as far as they know, but we prepare for contingencies." Nicole sat down across from me, her expression serious but not unkind. "I know you're scared. That's normal. But Catherine, you need to understand something. Your daughter and her husband are not going to hurt you during this meeting. They want your cooperation. They want you compliant. Violence would complicate things for them. They killed James. They arranged his death to look like an accident," she corrected. "That took planning, opportunity, deniability. What we're asking you to do tomorrow is give them what they think they want. A broken, grieving woman ready to give up. Let them feel like they've won. Let them get comfortable enough to talk freely." I pressed my hands flat against the table to stop them shaking. "What do I say?" "You don't have to say much. Let them lead the conversation. They'll want to talk about the sale, about moving you into town, about how much better your life will be. When they do, ask questions. Ask about timeline. Ask who's buying the property. If they mention development plans, ask for details. We need them to connect themselves to what happens next. And if they get suspicious, then you're a confused old woman who's overwhelmed," Kim said bluntly. "You forget things. You ask the same questions twice. You get emotional. Use their assumptions against them." Nicole pulled out a legal pad and pen. "Let's walk through likely scenarios. They arrive tomorrow at what time?" 2 p.m., I said, checking the message Sophia had sent confirming. "Good. Afternoon is better than evening. More natural, less isolated feeling. They'll probably start with small talk, ask how you're doing, ease into the business discussion. When they bring up the sale, you're going to seem reluctant at first. Not hostile, just sad, conflicted. You've lived here your whole adult life. This is hard for you." "It is hard," I said quietly. "I know," her voice softened. "And that's going to make it believable. They'll reassure you, tell you it's the right choice, maybe even get a little pushy if you hesitate too long. That's when you ask the questions. Who's buying? What happens to the land? When would I have to move? Sound like you're trying to picture it, trying to make peace with it." We rehearsed for over an hour, running through different versions of the conversation, different ways Sophia and Daniel might approach it, different ways I could redirect without seeming suspicious. By the time we finished, my head was pounding and my throat was dry. "One more thing," Torres said as they packed up the equipment. "If at any point you feel unsafe, if your instincts tell you something's wrong, you use the safe word. Say, 'I need to call my attorney.' That's the signal. We come in immediately. What if I actually need to call my attorney?" He smiled faintly. "Then say, 'I should probably talk to my lawyer.' Different phrasing. We'll know the difference." They left just before dark, taking back roads to avoid being seen. Nicole was the last one out the door. She turned back, studying me with something that looked like respect. "James was brave," she said. "What you're doing tomorrow is just as brave. He'd be proud of you." My eyes burned. "He'd be angry I have to do this at all." "Probably." She smiled sadly. "But he'd also know you're the only one who can. Get some rest if you can. We'll be in position by noon tomorrow." I didn't rest. I sat in James's office all night, surrounded by his things. The books he'd never finished, the reading glasses he'd left on his desk, the coffee mug I hadn't been able to wash because it still carried the faint ring of his last cup. I thought about all the small moments I'd missed or misinterpreted. The nights he came home tense and quiet, the way he'd started checking locks obsessively. The time I'd found him sitting in his truck at 3 a.m., staring at the western fence line, and he'd claimed he couldn't sleep. He'd been trying to protect me the only way he knew how, by keeping me ignorant, by handling it himself, by believing he could fix this before it destroyed our family. Instead, it had killed him. I must have fallen asleep in his chair at some point because I woke to sunlight streaming through the window and a crick in my neck that made me wince. The clock on the wall said 11:30, 2.5 hours until Sophia arrived. I showered, dressed in clothes that felt like armor, jeans, a soft sweater, boots. I made coffee I couldn't drink. I paced through the house, touching surfaces, memorizing details, trying to imagine how this place would feel if I succeeded, or what would happen to it if I didn't. At 1:15, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. In position. You're not alone. NR. I typed back a shaky thumbs up emoji and immediately felt ridiculous. At 1:45, Kim appeared at my back door, moving quickly and quietly. She fitted the wire under my sweater, adjusting the microphone until it sat flat against my sternum, invisible under the fabric. Testing, she said into a small handheld radio. A moment later, Nicole's voice came through, clear and strong. Catherine, can you say something? Like what? I asked. Perfect. We've got you. Remember, let them talk. You're doing great. Kim squeezed my shoulder once, then slipped back out the door and vanished into the tree line. I was alone again, waiting. At exactly 2 p.m., I heard tires on gravel. I moved to the window and watched Sophia's SUV pull up, Daniel driving, both of them wearing expressions of carefully managed concern. They sat in the vehicle for a moment, talking, preparing, getting their story straight, before climbing out and walking toward the house. I opened the door before they could knock. Mom, Sophia stepped forward and hugged me. I made myself return it, feeling the wire press against my ribs. Thank you for agreeing to talk. Come in, I said quietly. They settled at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd sat just yesterday, though it felt like years had passed. Daniel set down a leather portfolio, and Sophia placed a hand over mine. How are you feeling? She asked. Tired, I said honestly. Confused. That's understandable. She exchanged a glance with Daniel. We know this isn't easy, but we really do think it's the right move. Daniel opened the portfolio, pulling out paperwork. We've had the property appraised by 3 independent firms. The consensus valuation is $1.2 million. Given the current market and the development potential, we've already got a buyer willing to go $1.4. The number should have shocked me. Instead, it just felt like confirmation. Development potential? I repeated carefully. The buyer is a commercial group, Sophia said. They're planning a mixed-use project. Some residential, some retail. It's a good thing, Mom. It means jobs, growth for the area. What happens to the land itself? The forest? Most of it gets cleared, Daniel said, matter-of-factly. That's standard for this kind of development, but that's not something you need to worry about. By that point, you'll be settled somewhere new. I forced myself to look uncertain. It's just, your father loved this place. Dad's gone, Sophia said gently but firmly, and he'd want you to be practical. He wouldn't want you struggling out here alone. I pulled my hand back slowly, wrapping my arms around myself. Who is the buyer? What's the company name? Daniel hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Cascade Holdings. They're a private investment group based out of Seattle. I recognized the name from the documents on James's USB drive. A shell company, 3 layers deep, that ultimately traced back to Daniel's business partner, a man currently under federal investigation for money laundering. They're offering cash, Sophia added. No contingencies, no inspections. You could close within 30 days. That seems fast. It's generous, Daniel corrected. These buyers know what they want. The faster you move, the better the terms. I looked between them, seeing the careful choreography of this conversation. The way Sophia played emotion while Daniel delivered facts, the way they tag-teamed around anything that might trigger my resistance. Where would I go? I asked softly. Sophia brightened. We've been looking at options. There's a really nice assisted living community in Lakewood. Independent living, but with support staff on site. Activities, medical care, other people your age. Assisted living, I'm 63. It's not about age, Mom. It's about quality of life. You'd have everything you need, no maintenance, no worries, and we'd be close by. The way she said it, so reasonable, so concerned, made my stomach turn. This was the end game. Get me off the property, into a facility where I could be monitored and controlled while they buried evidence under tons of concrete and development permits. I need to think about it, I said. Daniel's expression hardened slightly. Catherine, with all respect, you've had time to think. We need to move forward. The buyers won't wait indefinitely. I understand, but do you? He leaned forward, his voice taking on an edge. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're letting emotion cloud practical judgment. This property is a financial drain. You can't maintain it. You can't afford it long term. The smart move is to sell while the offer is good. Daniel, Sophia said in a warning tone. She turned back to me, softening her expression. He's not wrong, Mom, but I know this is overwhelming. What if we arranged for you to tour the Lakewood facility? See it for yourself, talk to residents. Sometimes seeing the options makes it easier. I needed to push harder. What if I don't want to sell? What if I decide to stay? The silence that followed was weighted and dangerous. That would be unfortunate, Daniel said finally. Unfortunate how? Sophia sighed. Mom, we've talked to attorneys. If you're not capable of making sound financial decisions, I'm perfectly capable. Are you? Her voice sharpened. You're isolated, you're grieving, you're making decisions based on emotion rather than logic. A court might see that as evidence of diminished capacity. There it was, the threat delivered softly but unmistakably. Are you saying you try to take legal control away from me? We're saying we'd do what's necessary to protect you, Daniel said, even if you don't see it that way now. My heart pounded against the wire. That sounds like a threat. It's not a threat, Sophia said quickly. It's just, Mom, please, don't make this harder than it has to be. Sign the papers. Let us handle the details. You can focus on healing, on starting over. What if the property is worth more than you're saying? What if there's something here you're not telling me about? Daniel's expression went very still. What are you talking about? I'd gone too far. I could see it in their faces. The shift from persuasion to suspicion. I backpedaled quickly, making my voice uncertain. I heard there might be mineral rights or, I don't know, your father mentioned something once about surveys. Sophia relaxed slightly. There's nothing like that, Mom. Dad would have told us. But Daniel was still watching me too carefully. Did he leave paperwork? Files you've been looking through? No, I lied. I just remember him saying something. I might be confused. You are confused, Sophia said firmly, which is exactly why we need to handle this. You're not thinking clearly. She pulled out a pen and pushed papers across the table toward me. These are preliminary documents, just an agreement in principle to sell. It's not binding. Think of it as a first step, but it shows good faith to the buyers and it lets us start the process. I stared at the papers, my hands in my lap, trying to decide how far to take this. If I sign, what happens next? We move forward, Daniel said. Appraisals, title work, escrow. You'd have time to pack, to make arrangements. We're not going to throw you out on the street. How comforting, I said with more bitterness than I intended. Sophia flinched. Mom, please don't be like that. We're trying to help. I looked at my daughter. Really looked at her, searching for any trace of the person I'd raised. The child who'd clung to my hand during thunderstorms, who'd cried when she'd accidentally stepped on a beetle, who'd told me at age 7 that she wanted to be just like me when she grew up. All I saw was a stranger who'd learned to weaponize love. I need time, I said finally. You don't have time, Daniel snapped, then caught himself. The offer expires in 72 hours. Then I guess you'll know my answer in 72 hours. I stood up, my legs shaking but holding. I think you should go now. They didn't move immediately. Sophia looked at Daniel, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then she stood slowly, gathering the papers, her expression shifting into something colder. We're trying to be patient, she said quietly. But, Mom, accidents happen, especially to people living alone in isolated places. It would be terrible if something happened before this got resolved. The words hung in the air. Not quite a threat, not quite a warning, but unmistakably both. Are you threatening me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm stating facts, she said. People your age, living alone, operating heavy equipment, managing property, things go wrong. Dad knew that better than anyone. The implication was clear, the comparison intentional. Get out, I said. Get out of my house right now. Daniel moved toward the door, but Sophia lingered, her eyes locked on mine. 72 hours, Mom. Then we do this the hard way. They left. I stood frozen until I heard their vehicle pull away, tires spitting gravel, engine fading into distance. Then my legs gave out and I sank into a chair, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. The back door opened and Kim appeared, Nicole right behind her. You did great, Nicole said, kneeling beside me. We got everything, the threats, the timeline, the property details. This is exactly what we needed. They're going to kill me, I whispered. No, she said firmly. They're not, because in 48 hours we're making arrests, federal charges, racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering. We've got enough now between James's evidence and this recording to bury them. I looked up at her, tears streaming down my face. She's my daughter. I know. Nicole's expression softened. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't help, but I'm sorry. She helped me to my feet, steadying me when I swayed. We're going to move you to a safe location tonight. Protective custody until the arrests go down. You won't be alone. You won't be at risk. What about the property? We'll post agents here. If anyone tries to access it, we'll know. I nodded numbly, letting them guide me through the next steps. Packing a bag, securing the house, disconnecting from the only place I'd ever truly called home. As we drove away in the unmarked sedan, I looked back one last time at the house silhouetted against the mountains. James had died for this land, for the truth buried beneath it. Now I was abandoning it to strangers, hoping they could finish what he'd started, hoping I'd live long enough to see justice for the man I loved, and heartbreak for the daughter I'd lost. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a development 40 minutes outside Denver. Bland beige walls, rental furniture, windows that overlooked a parking lot, and nothing else. Nicole called it temporary. To me, it felt like exile. I spent 2 days there, watched over by rotating agents who tried to make conversation and mostly failed. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I sat on the scratchy couch with my phone turned off, replaying the confrontation with Sophia over and over in my mind, searching for the moment I could have said something different, done something better, changed the trajectory of what was coming. There was no such moment. This had been inevitable from the second James discovered what they'd been hiding. On the morning of the third day, Nicole arrived with coffee and news. It's happening tonight, she said, setting a cup in front of me. Simultaneous arrests. Sophia, Daniel, 3 of Daniel's business associates, and 2 sheriff's deputies who've been on the payroll. We've coordinated with state police to execute warrants. By midnight, they'll all be in custody. I wrapped my hands around the coffee cup but didn't drink. What happens to me? You'll need to testify eventually when this goes to trial. But for now, once the arrests are made, you can go home if you want. Or we can help you relocate temporarily if you'd feel safer somewhere else. Home. The word felt foreign in my mouth. I want to be there, I said suddenly. Nicole frowned. Where? When you arrest them, I want to see it happen. Catherine, I don't think that's... I need to see it. My voice came out stronger than I felt. I need to see her face when she realizes it's over. I stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. Nicole studied me for a long moment. This won't give you closure. It'll just give you a different kind of pain. I know. I met her eyes. But I need to see it anyway. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. You'll stay in my vehicle. You don't approach. You don't speak to her. You just watch. Understood? I nodded. That evening, we drove back toward my property as the sun set behind the mountains, turning the sky shades of orange and purple that James had always loved. Nicole's sedan was one of 6 vehicles in the convoy. Federal agents, state police, everyone moving with the kind of coordinated precision that came from extensive planning. We parked on a service road with the sight line to my house. Through binoculars, I could see lights on in the kitchen, 2 vehicles in the driveway. Sophia's SUV and a truck I didn't recognize. They're meeting with one of the business partners, Nicole said, listening to updates through her earpiece. Probably discussing what to do about you. My stomach twisted. Are they armed? We're assuming yes. That's why we're going in heavy. She glanced at me. Last chance to change your mind. I shook my head. At exactly 8:30, the operation began. Vehicles moved in from multiple directions, headlights cutting through the darkness, spotlights illuminating the house. Commands shouted through bullhorns. Federal agents, come out with your hands visible. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the front door opened and Daniel emerged, hands raised but moving slowly, deliberately. Too calm for someone who should have been surprised. He knew, I whispered. Nicole cursed under her breath, speaking rapidly into her radio. All units, proceed with caution. Suspects may be prepared. Daniel kept walking toward the agents, still too calm, and that's when I saw it. The slight bulk under his jacket, the way his right hand drifted toward his waistband. Gun! Someone shouted. Everything happened at once. Daniel dropped and rolled, pulling a weapon. Agents dove for cover, returning fire. The sharp crack of gunshots split the night air. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. Sophia appeared in the doorway, and for one horrible moment I thought she'd been hit. But she was running, not toward the agents, but toward the back of the house, disappearing around the corner. Suspect fleeing west on foot, an agent yelled into the radio. Nicole threw the sedan into gear, tires spitting gravel as we tore down the service road. She's heading for the caves, she said grimly. If she gets underground, we'll lose her. We bounced over rough terrain, headlights jolting across scrub brush and pine trees. In the distance, I could see flashlight beams moving through the darkness. Sophia running, agents pursuing. Then the lights disappeared. Nicole braked hard, and we jumped out. She had her weapon drawn, moving quickly toward the western boundary where the land dropped away into rocky outcroppings and hidden hollows. Other agents converged from different directions, flashlights crisscrossing in the dark. There, someone shouted. I saw her then. Sophia, 50 yards ahead, scrambling over rocks toward what looked like a natural split in the hillside. She glanced back once, her face illuminated by a flashlight beam, and even from that distance, I could see the desperation in her expression. She disappeared into the opening. Do not pursue into confined spaces without backup, Nicole ordered. Seal the exits. We wait for tactical, but I was already moving. I couldn't explain why, couldn't justify it rationally. I just knew that if my daughter vanished into those caves, if she became a fugitive hiding underground like some kind of animal, something essential would break inside me that could never be repaired. I ran before Nicole could stop me. Catherine, no. I ignored her, stumbling over rocks, my boots sliding on loose gravel, heading for the opening where Sophia had disappeared. Behind me, agents were shouting, but I didn't stop. The cave entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. I clicked on my phone's flashlight and pushed inside, the beam cutting through absolute darkness. The passage opened into a larger chamber, and I could hear Sophia ahead of me, ragged breathing, the scuff of feet on stone. Sophia! I called out, my voice echoing strangely. The sounds stopped. Mom! Her voice came from somewhere to my left, disoriented and small. What are you doing? I could ask you the same thing. I moved carefully, sweeping my light across uneven ground, trying not to fall. There's nowhere to go. They've sealed the exits. You don't understand. She materialized out of the shadows, dirt-streaked and wild-eyed. We didn't mean for it to get this far. It was just supposed to be storage. Just a way to make some extra money. But once you're in, they don't let you out. Who doesn't? The people Daniel was working with. The network, she laughed bitterly. You think we wanted this? We were in over our heads before we even realized what we'd agreed to. You killed your father, I said, my voice breaking. I didn't. The words burst out of her, desperate and anguished. I didn't touch him, Mom. It was supposed to just be a warning, a scare to make him back off. But the people Daniel brought in, they didn't listen. They went too far. Tears streamed down her face, catching in the beam of my flashlight. I tried to stop it. I swear to God I tried. But by the time I realized what they'd done, it was too late. Dad was gone, and Daniel said if I talked, we'd both go to prison. Or worse. So I kept quiet. I played the grieving daughter. And I hated myself every single day. I wanted to believe her. Some deep, primal part of me that would always be her mother wanted desperately to believe that my daughter hadn't actively murdered the man she'd called Daddy for 30 years. But belief required trust, and trust required truth, and I didn't know anymore if Sophia was even capable of that. You threatened me, I said quietly. At my kitchen table, you threatened my life. I was trying to protect you. She stepped closer, and I saw how young she looked suddenly. Not a criminal, just a frightened woman who'd made catastrophic choices. If you'd just sold the property, they would have left you alone. You could have walked away clean. But you kept digging, kept asking questions, and I knew they'd see you the same way they saw Dad. I was trying to scare you into compliance so they wouldn't hurt you. By telling me I might have an accident, by making you understand the danger you were in. She was crying openly now. I know how it sounded. I know how it looked. But Mom, I swear, I was trying to save your life the only way I knew how. Behind us, I heard movement. Agents entering the cave, flashlights approaching. Time was running out. "You need to come with me," I said. "Right now. Surrender yourself. Tell them everything. If you cooperate, if you testify against the others." "They'll kill me in prison," she whispered. "These people have reach everywhere. The second I'm in custody, I'm dead. Then testify from protection, work with the prosecutors. But Sophia, you cannot run from this. There's no version of this story where you disappear into caves and come out the other side with your life intact." She stared at me, and I saw the moment she understood I was right. The moment the last thread of hope snapped and reality crashed in. Her shoulders sagged. Her hands dropped to her sides. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry, Mom. For all of it, I wanted to tell her I forgave her. I wanted to wrap my arms around her and promise it would be okay." But I couldn't give her either of those things. Not honestly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "I know," I said instead. "I believe you." Lights flooded the chamber as agents poured in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Sophia raised her hands without fighting, let them cuff her wrists behind her back, let them read her rights in the echoing darkness of the cave her greed and fear had led her into. As they led her past me, she stopped. "Did he really leave evidence?" I nodded. "Good," she said softly. "He deserved better than silence." Then they took her away, and I stood alone in the cave with my flashlight, listening to the sounds fade until there was nothing left but my own breathing and the slow drip of water somewhere in the darkness. Nicole found me there 10 minutes later. "You shouldn't have gone in alone," she said, but there was no anger in her voice, just exhaustion. "I know. Did she say anything?" "She said she was sorry." I looked at Nicole. "Does that matter? To a jury, maybe? To the charges she's facing?" Nicole shook her head. "She's going to prison, Catherine, for a long time, whether she pulled the trigger or not. She was part of the conspiracy, and conspiracy to commit murder carries the same weight as murder." I nodded slowly, feeling nothing in particular. Not relief, not grief, not vindication. Just a hollow awareness that this chapter had ended, and I had no idea what the next one looked like. We climbed back out into the night air. Emergency vehicles had filled my property. Flashing lights, yellow crime scene tape, agents and officers moving with purpose. My house stood in the middle of it all, illuminated and exposed, no longer mine in any meaningful sense. Daniel had been taken into custody without further incident after the initial shots were fired. No one had been seriously injured. The others had been arrested at their homes without drama. It was over. The trial took 11 months. I testified twice. Once for the prosecution outlining what James had discovered and what I'd experienced. Once in rebuttal after the defense tried to paint me as a confused widow manufacturing conspiracy theories. The jury deliberated for 4 days, guilty on all counts. Daniel received 35 years. Sophia received 22, with possibility of parole in 15 if she maintained good behavior, and continued cooperating with ongoing investigations into the larger trafficking network. I attended the sentencing but left before victim impact statements. I'd said everything I needed to say during testimony. The rest was between Sophia, the judge, and whatever God she believed in. The property stayed in my name. The caves were permanently sealed after federal investigators finished documenting everything they'd been used for. The land itself was placed under conservation easement, protecting it from future development, ensuring it would remain wild and empty and safe. I couldn't live there anymore. The house held too many ghosts. James in every corner, Sophia's childhood in every photograph, the weight of everything that had been lost pressing down until I couldn't breathe. I sold it to a young family from Boulder who promised to maintain the trails and preserve James's garden. They had 2 small children who chased each other through the rooms where my daughter had once played, filling the space with different memories, better ones. I bought a small house in town, walking distance from a library and a coffee shop and neighbors who didn't know my story and didn't ask questions. I kept James's wedding ring on a chain around my neck. I kept 3 photographs of Sophia from before everything broke. One from her college graduation, one from her wedding, one from a camping trip when she was 10 and the world still made sense. She writes me letters from prison. I don't always read them. Sometimes I do late at night when I can't sleep, searching for some trace of the girl I raised and the woman who helped destroy our family. Sometimes I find her, sometimes I don't. I write back occasionally. Short notes, updates on small things, the garden, the weather, a book I read. I don't tell her I forgive her because I'm not sure that's true yet. I don't tell her I hate her because that's not true either. I tell her I'm still here, still standing, still choosing to wake up each morning and face whatever comes. That feels like enough. 2 years after the trial, I visited James's grave on what would have been our 35th anniversary. I brought wildflowers picked from the conservation land, Indian paintbrush and columbine, the same flowers he used to pick for me on hiking trips. I told him about the house, about the family living there now, about how his garden still bloomed every spring. I told him Sophia was alive, that she was safe, that some part of me still hoped she could find redemption even though I didn't know if I believed in it anymore. I told him I missed him, that I understood why he'd kept secrets, that I wished we'd had more time. The wind moved through the cemetery trees, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice telling me I was stronger than I knew, that I'd done what needed doing, that he was proud. I chose to believe it was real. Life didn't return to what it was before. It became something else entirely. Smaller in some ways, larger in others, quieter, more deliberate, mine. At 65, I learned that betrayal doesn't always announce itself with violence and drama. Sometimes it grows slowly in the people you love most, fed by fear and desperation and choices that seem reasonable until you step back far enough to see the destruction they've caused. I learned that truth has weight, that it can crush you or set you free depending on how you carry it. I learned that motherhood doesn't end when your child becomes a monster. It just changes shape, becomes something more complicated, more painful, more durable than the simple love you started with. And I learned that strength isn't about never breaking. It's about what you do with the pieces after everything shatters. The land is still there, protected and wild. So am I. And the truth that nearly destroyed us all now rests where it belongs. Not buried in darkness, but exposed to light, where it can't hurt anyone else, where it can finally let the rest of us heal.